Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. But of course, it's not a bad comic today. As I said last time, it's a Patreon-sponsored review of something that is decidedly not a comic. It's a JRPG! And hey, I'm well known for my opinions about JRPGs, like Pokemon and, Pokemon! The Legend of Heroes series is one of those things that the angry video game nerd would make a chronologically confused video about if he actually played these sort of things. The games are developed by the company Nihon Falcom, and the first two were actually part of a completely different series of games called Dragon Slayer, with said games being called Dragon Slayer: The Legend of Heroes 1 and 2. For reasons that I couldn't find, it spun off into its own series, The Legend of Heroes. You might think it was because it focused on different characters than the Dragon Slayer games, but nope. Of course, the sequels exist within their own separate sets of continuities, so like Final Fantasy, they just shove the name on them for brand recognition, despite the fact that they really have nothing to do with one another. And once these games were brought to the US, it was decided to rename them in the same kind of asinine way Final Fantasy was, hence why in Japan there's Dragon Slayer: The Legend of Heroes 1 and 2, then The Legend of Heroes 3, while in America we have the first Dragon Slayer game, and then Legend of Heroes 3 becomes The Legend of Heroes 2. Oh, but despite this being the mid-2000s and they're releasing 10-year-old games, they had to do it out of order. So the American version of Legend of Heroes 4 was released before the American version of Legend of Heroes 3, although without a number attached to it. Once the fifth game arrived, they called that Legend of Heroes 3. Oh, did I not mention that? Yeah, the second game of one trilogy came out before the first. Smooth. Dragon Slayer: The Legend of Heroes 2 never got an English release, but I assume at this point that if they did release it, they'd call it Zombie 9. Then when they reached the next one, the one we're looking at today, Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky, they just abandoned the numbering concept for the American release and just called each individual game in a sub-series their own number within it. The story is a steampunkish fantasy turn-based RPG. You've seen it before, and this is the first game of this little sub-series, so there's no major backstory that isn't just part of the story itself. In case you're wondering, this request came from the same person who paid for Cho Dengeki Striker, so hopefully this one will have less pedophilic dogs. And as such, let's dig into The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky and see what it does have in store for us.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man, punch, wears a birdie hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazon and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
The story begins with a prologue cutscene showing our main character, Estelle Bright, as her father Cassius comes home with an unconscious boy in his arms. Honey, you will never believe what was on sale at the mall today! Don't make such a fuss or you'll wake him up. Wake him up? You mean he's still alive? Well, now how am I supposed to cook him for dinner? This is Joshua, who has a mysterious backstory that we don't learn until the end of the game. And it's otherwise irrelevant to the plot anyway. We jump ahead 5 years later, where Estelle and Joshua, now having been raised together as sister and brother, are on their way to the town of Roland to complete their training as bracers, which I'll explain in a moment. Cassius asks them to pick up a copy of his favorite newspaper, Liberal News. Damn liberal media! I hear they want to give equal rights to slime monsters. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Liberal, which is basically the name of the country we're in, headed over by Queen Alicia II. So here's some quick background info to set the stage here. 10 years ago, Liberal was invaded and almost conquered by the neighboring Erebonian Empire, but were driven off during the 100 Days War. Since then, the two nations have been at peace, especially because Liberal actually has very advanced technology, utilizing pseudo-magical power sources called orbaments. Orbament technology has allowed the kingdom to be pretty much a steampunk environment with airships, heavy machinery, and even phones and weapons. Estelle and Joshua are completing their training to become members of the Bracers Guild. The Bracers are an organized, multinational mercenary organization dedicated to helping people in need. Usually that involves killing monsters, providing increased security, and any number of odd jobs that need doing, usually for a small fee. They have a good relationship with the military, for the most part, although they're a strictly civilian operation, so anytime the government comes a-knocking and asking them to stay out of their affairs, they agree. Which is only amusing to me, since governments tend to have the complete opposite policy. Cassius, being one of the foremost members of the Bracers, has to leave on a trip, a thing that he seems to do quite frequently that Estelle is bitter over, and dumps his workload on his children. Estelle's mother was killed during the war, but the two are teenagers capable of taking care of themselves for a bit. After passing their final test, they become junior bracers. They'll have to travel around and work at every bracer office in the country, don't worry, there are only 5 of them, in order to get promoted to senior status. I should note that I'm actually going to leave out a lot of characters and events that happened in the game since, well, it took me around 40 hours to complete this thing and there are a lot of characters. Most of them side ones that are only relevant for certain sections of the plot, but not important enough for the overall narrative. Speaking of, the main narrative in the first town involves the theft of some septium, the chief mineral responsible for making orbaments. It's done by some sky pirates that you fight and defeat, but they manage to get away. And you soon learn that Cassius's ship, meant to return him to Roland, was shot down, supposedly by the pirates. Great, now I've got to do all of his work! Alright, what's next on the list? Shave mustache even thinner. By the way, I apologize for the quality of some of this footage. I originally started recording it at 720p, but since Fraps doesn't give me an option to control the bitrate, 3 minutes of footage filled out 4 gigs. In a game I was told would take 50 hours. Yeah, I condensed the capture size in half to give me something better to work with. In addition, I needed to convert all that footage down to something more manageable that would actually function in Premiere. There's the reality of game reviews, guys. 90% of the footage you capture will be utterly worthless anyway, since it won't end up in the review. And it takes up an entire hard drive's worth of storage. The AVGN actually has a friggin' archive of game footage from stuff he's played to make it easier on himself. Eventually, I just got sick of seeing how badly it got compressed that I was just much more discerning about what I recorded and bumped it back up to 720p. But obviously I wasn't going to replay 10 hours to get that footage again. But if you think the footage looks bad, then it gets 1,000 times worse when it comes to the content. See, one of the subplots of the story is the growing romance between Estelle and Joshua, who, I remind you, are brother and sister. Now, admittedly, adopted brother, but they have been raised as siblings. You can't even argue that it's 2 consenting adults making that decision for themselves. They're underage. And before you try to push cultural differences about age, a small plot detail later on in the games is how the Princess of Liberal, also 16 years old, is being pressured to get into a political marriage, even though most people around her think she's too young. Now, if it was just random people commenting on it who didn't know they were siblings, that's understandable. But people who have known Estelle since she was a baby nudge her into a romance with her adopted brother! It's creepy and weird, and even weirder that the game keeps pushing it to the end. I don't even get why they don't just have him stay at an orphanage in town or something. Given that we know the town was hit by the war, you'd think that'd be a natural spot for this. It's like the game needed a reason why they weren't together already, so they hit upon the idea of, oh, they see each other like siblings, while forgetting that since he was adopted by Cassius, they are siblings! Anywho, moving on from that happy subject, here's how the battle system works. You have 3 different forms of attacks. Your standard type of attack with a weapon, arts, basically just magic, And crafts. Arts and crafts, ha ha ha. Crafts are special skills unique to each character. You gain points for using crafts by either attacking or being attacked. Once you've hit 100 points, you can use a limit break, or S-craft, to execute a very powerful attack, one that actually bypasses whoever's turn is next to do it. Strategically, it's best to do it right after you've already done your normal turn. The arts are equipped to people through objects referred to as quartz. Basically, monsters and enemies, once defeated, don't drop cash, but a resource called sepith. You can trade the sepith to unlock slots and forge quartz, objects that can enhance your stats, and that affects different arts you can use. There are also stat buffing arts, healing arts, protective arts, etc., but I usually don't use them as often because I am uncomplicated and just like hitting things with cool looking attacks. As I said, the monsters don't give out money like in other RPGs, which makes sense. What the hell do you need money for when you're a giant hornet? And instead you get money by selling items you find, or primarily by doing side quests at the Bracer Guild, posted on bulletin boards for any bracer to take advantage of. Looking for one lost hole. It was here, but it's gone now. Moving on to the next city, Bose, we learned that the military is investigating the attack on the airship, but haven't made much progress. This is where we learned that basically everybody on Earth knew who Cassius was. He was a major war hero, a former military officer who has rubbed shoulders with every politician and official across the world, and his children were completely unaware of it. You'd think there'd be reporters out constantly trying to get a story with him and his family. And yes, a side character in this is a reporter investigating what's going on. It gets pretty ridiculous since Estelle is continually shocked to learn that people know who her dad is, even though it keeps happening. Every time we meet someone who knows him, she's just flabbergasted by that concept. I half expected her to exclaim shocked that Joshua knew who he was. Anyway, we managed to track down the Sky Pirates base and learn that they're holding the crew of the airship hostage for ransom, something confusing to two of the Sky Pirates leaders. It's a group of siblings, two brothers and a sister, and the eldest brother has become increasingly violent and bloodthirsty, happily proclaiming that he plans to kill the hostages after they get the ransom money, to the shock of the others. However, upon defeating him, he seems confused about what's happening and is experiencing memory loss. We recover the hostages, but Cassius isn't among them. It seems he stepped off the ship right before takeoff, and they didn't have time to change the passenger manifest before they were attacked. Cassius contacts our heroes via letter, also sending a package containing a strange black orbiment without any serial numbers on it, with instructions to bring it to a scientist named Professor Russell. You know, for a guy who's met everybody on Earth and saved so many people and is this big cool hero of renown and fame, he seems to pawn all his work off on us. One thing that seems to be strange about the situation is that the military have a leak to the Sky Pirates, since the pirates seem to be part of a bigger plan involving some mysterious black-clad figures. Anyway, we move on to Ruin, a tourist city with most of the local bracers helping with a member of the royal family staying in town, while also helping out with the local school and a festival they're putting on. We also run into a sweet little orphanage that gets burned down. And here's where we get into something that really bugs me about RPGs sometimes. RPGs like this need side quests to occupy your time in between major events. That's fine. The problem is when the quests are so damn asinine. Hey, we've got a prestigious order of monster hunters, bodyguards, and investigators. What should we have them do? Oh, I don't know. How about we have two of them participate in a play for a school festival at a school they don't attend? Oh, and they even have to go to classes for a week at this school, despite having no reason to do so if they're just there for the damn play. This is especially frustrating because we're doing this since the investigation of the arson was taken away from us by a dickhead senior bracer. We're too close to it. Yeah, we're so close to it and how we, give a crap about it. Oh, but hey, we have to help out with this school festival. It's to make the little kids happy. Hey, you know what would probably make them even happier? Having a place to live! Hell, some of the students don't care about the festival either. I'd rather just spend the time relaxing. Why should I have to get roped into this crap? 8-Bit Mickey is right. What the hell am I doing here? The sad thing is that this actually is a game-necessary thing, and that's what's so stupid about it. This is the kind of job for a side quest, but they've made it a necessary part of the game, despite it really having no impact on the plot later. Fortunately, the majority of side quests can be completely avoided. For example, in the next town, there's a side quest about helping a librarian out with various odd jobs. It apparently goes into multiple parts, too. Oh yeah, guys, I'd love to help with this mysterious object that might mean the end of our civilization, but I've got some old newspapers I've got to archive. Locating lost items, I get that. Escort missions, basically just bodyguard work, makes sense. But helping a friggin' librarian? This world has got cars, cell phones, and assembly line factories, but no temp agencies? Did the guild muscle out all the other ones? And really, am I the one most qualified for this sort of thing? Armed with swords and magic?
Conan the Librarian.
Fortunately, we are brought back in as things grow increasingly worrisome. The military is stepping up their presence, only calmed down a bit by the leader of the newly formed intelligence division, Colonel Richard. Shock of all shocks, he knew Cassius as well. Further investigations reveal that the mayor is in cahoots with the mysterious black-clad figures. He had the orphanage burned down so he could expand the tourism areas of the city, despite it being, like, several miles away from the city, but whatever, and gain some new capital by working with the black-clad figures, since he kinda, sorta, gambled away most of the city's budget.
I'm the government, I'm the government, I'm the reason nothing works.
The mayor also owns an ancient artifact that can stop time, passed down by his family for generations, so he almost gets away with murdering our heroes, but it turns out that the black orbment reacts to the device and cancels it out, absorbing its orbal energy. When the mayor is finally caught, like the Sky Pirates, he's suddenly having memory problems and doesn't know what's going on. And people thought "I don't recall" during Iran-Contra was a lie. Clearly, there was a conspiracy at work to brainwash politicians! I should note that each city of the game constitutes a chapter of the story, taking up about 6 to 10 hours of gameplay depending on how much of the side quests you do. Strangely, the first chapter was considered a prologue, despite it being actual plot stuff and long enough for its own chapter, so go figure. Anyway, chapter 3 brings us to the city of Zeiss, where Professor Russell lives and works at an orbment manufacturing plant. Turns out the guy is pretty much the one responsible for orbment technology, so he's the best for figuring out what the black orbment is. However, during his attempts to open it, after causing a power outage with it, the black-clad figures storm the factory and kidnap him, although when they reach the ground floor, a picture reveals them wearing the uniforms of the Royal Guardsmen, the Queen's personal guards. However, despite that evidence, we later learn that the professor is being held in a nearby military base, and we soon discover that Colonel Richard is behind this, threatening to kill Russell's granddaughter if he doesn't assist in unlocking the secrets behind the black orbment. After sneaking in and rescuing him, we learn from the head of the military base that the intelligence division has been secretly gaining more and more power over the regular military for a while now, jailing dissenters or threatening their loved ones if they don't cooperate. The evidence against the Royal Guardsmen is actually a ploy to brandish them as traitorous terrorists, thus securing even more authority and power for the intelligence division. The black-clad soldiers are actually the division's special ops unit. Professor Russell and his granddaughter head out on the run with that jerky senior bracer I mentioned before, while Estelle and Joshua head to the capital to hopefully contact the Queen and tell her about what's going on. And allow me to take a quick break from the plot to discuss my major complaint about this game: the camera. You have the option to make the camera fixed or have the ability to rotate it. The problem is that every time you enter a building, it changes the camera perspective to a fixed one, since obviously you don't need to see every iota of a general store's interior. However, when you exit back outside, the camera's angle has changed and you're forced to try to reset it so it matches the minimap and you know where everything is. Now, I later discovered that there was an option to have the minimap change with the camera, but that seems like I just get more lost navigating around otherwise unfamiliar areas. And before you say, well, just leave the camera fixed at one angle, There are actually items and whatnot hidden from view that require you to rotate around and realize they're there. It's not a game-breaking problem, of course, it's just really damn annoying when it happens every time I exit a place and I have to reorient myself to know where I'm going. Speaking of annoyances, the final chapter of the game is a slog to get through. The longest part of it by far. Maybe that's because it doesn't really have any side quests like the other towns do, but especially the final dungeon takes forever. Mind you, part of that is self-inflicted, but I'll get to that in a bit. On the way to Gransel, the capital city, you discover that a nearby royal villa has been taken over by the intelligence division for anti-terrorism activities. With the royal guardsmen implicated in the professor's kidnapping, the special ops forces have basically assumed all functions regarding protecting the royal family. Gransel is placed increasingly under martial law as the chapter unfolds, mostly thanks to the approach of the Queen's birthday, which has been an event that the game has referenced several times by this point. Turns out this whole thing was just an elaborate way of having Colonel Richard jump out of a cake for her. It's been announced that the Queen is ill and thus hasn't made any public appearances lately, and with the increased security in the town, there's no way to get in to see her. Fortunately, there's a martial arts tournament underway where the winners will be allowed to attend a banquet at the castle, so it's our best bet for getting inside the place. And naturally, they use such sophisticated martial arts techniques like machine guns and explosives. Bah, we know that the real kind of martial arts out there is ninja-style dancing.
I wanna dance with you until the sun comes creeping through. I wanna dance with you. I won't stop pleasing you.
We also make contact with the captain of the guardsmen, who informs us the best way to get to the Queen is through her head maid, delivering a letter to her that explains the situation. At the banquet, it's revealed that at the Queen's birthday celebration, she's going to officially announce that her loutish, boorish, asshole idiot of a nephew is going to be named her successor, despite the Queen's granddaughter being next in line. It's justified that the princess, being only 16, is really not in any capacity ready to take on the role and might be in a better position when she's older, but not quite yet. It's decent enough reasoning, even though clearly the nephew is a selfish sack of crap and would make for a terrible ruler. Once we actually get in to see the Queen, she lays out what's really going on here, and I will give the game a lot of praise on one thing: Colonel Richard. See, Colonel Richard is not some madman bent on destroying the world or something. He's a legitimately charming, likable, intelligent guy who loves Liberl and wants to protect it. The problem is that he's built up this massive hero worship over Cassius, believing that he alone was solely responsible for saving Liberl during the 100 Days War, and not that it was a combination of his efforts and several other factors that won them through. While he himself is not misogynistic, he knows some of the neighboring countries are, and that if one unmarried queen ruling Liberl was enough to piss them off, having two in a row, one of whom was just a 16-year-old with no political experience whatsoever, would be a sign of weakness and an invitation to invade again. The only reason they haven't been attacked so far is because Liberl is much more technologically advanced than the others, but considering this technology is in everybody's homes, it won't exactly take a master spy to bring this stuff back, reverse engineer it, and that advantage will be gone. And since Cassius is no longer in the military and is missing right now, Richard is even more convinced that they stand on the cusp of war with their neighbors, and he needs to do everything he can to protect Liberl, even if that means staging a coup d'etat so he can be the power behind the throne. And considering a lot of JRPG villains like in Final Fantasy or something have the motivation of, I want to end suffering by destroying the world, and other bass-ackwards reasons for their villainy, having it just be a good person who's making moral compromises is very refreshing. Colonel Richard wants to take control of an ancient device buried deep under Gransel called the Shining Ring that, according to legend, has the power to control nature itself. A weapon of that magnitude would ensure Liberl's protection for who knows how long, and the Black Orbment is somehow the key to activating it. Personally, I think the Black Orbment being able to disable Orbment power itself would be enough, but I suppose it's one of those things they can't really direct at the enemy and would just screw themselves over if they tried to use it. Anyway, the Queen is going along with this because the princess is being held hostage by the Colonel at the royal villa we passed by on the way into town. We bring in all the other bracers, as well as the exiled guardsmen, and stage a pretty well-executed rescue, with diversions and multiple attack teams and stuff. This is another thing the game does handle well. In settings like this, usually the main characters have to sort out the problems by themselves in circumstances that are more than a little ridiculous given what they're up against, but here we have resources and other people and just a good old-fashioned commando raid on the villa. It's revealed that the princess is actually Chloe, the schoolgirl we met when we wasted our time decorating some high school instead of unraveling the conspiracy that resulted in her kidnapping. But it was all worth it. Sure, lots of people are dead, imprisoned, or have their loved ones being threatened so they'll capitulate, but we got to put Joshua in a dress! LOL! With the villa retaken, including a stolen intelligence airship, everyone wants to ship Chloe out of there for her protection, but she insists that the situation needs to be fixed before the birthday, which means they have to rescue the Queen. They utilize a similar plan as before, with diversions to draw forces away from the castle, but also having one team sneak in using the sewers while the other flies the airship in. So now it's time to rescue the Queen.
Bye-bye, boys!
Have fun storming the castle!
After several battles, we reach the Queen again, although she's being guarded by Lieutenant Lawrence, the mysterious leader of the Special Ops team. He's from a competing mercenary group to the Bracers called the Jaegers, and Joshua seems to recognize him, but says nothing to explain himself. Because withholding information when you're engaged in a life-or-death struggle to rescue your entire country is really the best option. I mean, talking about it makes you slightly uncomfortable. That's the worst. The boss fight, theoretically, from walkthroughs can be won, but it's hard as all hell and really should only be attempted if you're going for 100% completion, since he cheats like a bastard. Very powerful moves, massive healing abilities, stops you from casting arts. It's a pain, and you're supposed to lose anyway. He's, of course, cryptic about all this, proclaiming that everything is going to plan before handing over the Queen and departing, making me wonder why the hell he put up a fight if he was just gonna hand her over anyway. Once the castle is retaken, we learn that Colonel Richard is already on his way down to activate the Shining Ring. Fortunately, all of our plucky allies we met along the game show up to come help, and we're allowed to choose our party. Sort of. See, the party is limited to 4 people, and since Estelle and Joshua are the main characters, we can't switch them out, meaning we can only pick the 2 people who can help. Fortunately, none of the other characters are bad, they just have different strengths and weaknesses, so it's up to the player to decide the best way to approach it. I picked Zane, who's a big burly dude who I am a man punches stuff, but also has enough defense and hit points to serve as a tank. The other choice was Chloe, since she knows a lot of group healing, so she's basically our white mage. They also serve as backups to Estelle and Joshua, since I made sure to give Estelle some minor group healing abilities, while Joshua has been a damage sponge throughout the game. Seriously, anytime there was a group of monsters, they tended to fixate on Joshua above anybody else. What the hell is it about this kid's face that makes monsters want to tear it off? But yeah, as I said, the final dungeon just takes so long. It's not so bad if you're just rushing through it, but the thing is that this dungeon seems designed to help people get in some last-minute level ups and equipment before the final boss. Several treasure chests contain the most powerful weapons and equipment for party members, so it's in your best interest to go through them and take what you need. Except somehow a group of giant powerful robots are all hiding inside of the chests, and you need to defeat them to get the equipment. Look at these things! How the hell are they hiding inside of a dinky little trunk?
Time Lord Science. It's bigger on the inside.
By this point, if you've done some grinding like I did in the final chapter to beef up your characters, it shouldn't be any problem to deal with them, but they're not exactly a walk in the park, and after a certain point they just become tedious and annoying, taking several minutes to finish up. The good news is that since you're defeating so many of these things and are given a bunch of sepith to fashion quartz, you can continually get better and better equipped for the final boss battle. Now, they must have realized it would be silly for us to go on this daring mission only for us then to leave and go back back to town while the special ops forces are still being fought in the town just for us to fashion some new equipment, so Professor Russell is there to fashion the quartz. However, to make it really silly, he's also there to serve as a store for potions and equipment. He sells us this stuff. Look, I've been on the run from the military for 2 weeks with an ornery bracer, my granddaughter, and nothing to eat but bugs and a tree stump for a toilet. Whether you win or lose, I'm retiring in style after this. One thing that makes the dungeon crawl a bit more tolerable is the music. It's a fast-paced, exciting remix of the normally slow and soft theme music, so it keeps everything nice and energized for you as you make your way through it. It's just the effects of the music wear off after an hour in this place. Once you reach the bottom, you face Colonel Richard, and like I said, he's an honorable sort, so he's willing to talk things out with our heroes, but he can't agree with them. However, it's made plainly clear that even he's being manipulated, since his memory is having issues just like the Sky Pirates, the Mayor of Ruin, and some others. However, that's stuff for the sequels. In the here and now, the battle against him isn't difficult at all. But of course, you don't have a huge ancient device in a fantasy setting and not turn it on, so it's activated. The real final boss is Reverie, a robot left by the ancient civilization to keep this thing from being turned on. There are 3 stages to this fight, and if you know what you're doing, you should be fine. The first stage involves these 2 giant floating heads who provide assistance. The one on the right is immune to physical attacks, while the one on the left is immune to arts. So you just focus on defeating one, then the other, and the robot's a bit of a pushover in this first form. The second form is the hardest, but again, if you know what you're doing, you'll be fine. He has a crap ton of hit points, but since it's alone, it only makes one move. The walkthrough I read recommended having one party member casting a guard spell on the members to absorb a hit, while everyone else attacks or heals as they need to. Use one of them on occasion to recharge your mana with items and just keep pressing. Even this form has stages that he goes through, first casting a missile that will cancel out arts, and it's best to provoke this reaction by casting something before its turn, since otherwise it'll summon additional robot helpers to attack or buff its stats. Once it loses a certain number of hit points, it'll stop trying to cancel your arts, and you just have to absorb hits as they come while attacking with what you got. I'm fond of White Gehenna myself, since that art opens up a portal to hell and unleashes hundreds of demon bats on the enemy. White Gehenna, ensuring that every place you stop is bat country. Once its health is low enough, I'd say around 5,000, hit it with crafts, but it's still not quite dead yet. Colonel Richard, since he's not a bad person, tries to intervene and convince our heroes to make a run for it, but he's saved by the arrival of Cassius! Well, look who it is! Sir not appearing in this film! Where the hell have you been? The final form is easy, just keep hitting it and it dies. In fact, this final form is so pathetic you don't even fight it if your bracer rank isn't high enough. But whatever, the day is saved, the Queen celebrates her birthday, we're given some revelations about Joshua's past to set up the next game, and there was one twist that I admit I did not see coming, so I won't spoil it for you, and Joshua admits that he has to leave because of these revelations. Estelle admits her growing attraction and love for Joshua, because why not have a final note of creepiness? He gives her a sedative kiss to get even creepier, then leaves for the next game, and roll credits. This game is perfectly okay. And that's it. Here's the problem with the game. It's unremarkable. Don't get me wrong, it's a perfectly good game. I played it, I enjoyed it, I wouldn't mind checking out the 2 sequels that continue the story, but the thing is that the story isn't anything to write home about. It touches on several fantasy setting cliches and tropes, the conspiracies of corrupt governments, the member of royalty who was secretly hiding out as a commoner, and the ancient, highly advanced civilization that died out due to some catastrophe. Mysterious pasts, mysterious warriors who spout faux philosophical bullcrap, ancient devices that seem wholly impractical but look really cool. It's all here. The thing is that these are not necessarily things against it, just in how they're executed. And they're executed just fine. This game does not have any profound meanings or speak to some deeper truth. It's just an enjoyable, fun little fantasy RPG with a diverse amount of character personalities and combat styles. Mind you, being the first part of a trilogy might make it be that the first part has to be the most basic before the sequels let loose, but I'm not judging it based on its part of the larger narrative, just on its own. And on its own, it's okay. Pretty good. Check it out if you're curious. Next time, it's back to bad comics and to the Ultimate Universe with another issue of Ultimate Power. Let's see how much Greg Land can trace the same face over and over again this time.